Thanks for watching this video. It focuses on class and location tracking in QBO Plus. A couple things just to qualify as we're going along here. You need QuickBooks Online Plus, obviously, in order for class or location tracking. And I'll go over the difference between the two. We'll see it on some transactions and look at some reporting. I want to make sure that you know, though, there's no viable balance sheet by class at this point in QuickBooks Online Plus. And you can watch my video on source versus target, and class tracking kind of goes through that. Some people will use location tracking as a workaround for a balance sheet by class, for your nonprofits or what have you. But just keep in mind, as you'll see in my demo here, location tracking, you can only have one per transaction. So if you're splitting out a bill across multiple classes, you'll never see that AP broken out on a balance sheet. Profit and loss all day long, works great. But there's no, balance sheet by class, and I know Premier and Enterprise have it. A canned report, there's still a lot of work you got to do to make that even viable, but there's no viability for that in QuickBooks Online Plus, unless you're using a journal entry. But then if you're using a journal entry for this stuff, you're not getting that detail reporting. So I typically just say no, okay, when I get that question. It's still a very formidable and helpful tool, this class location tracking, and you're probably used to it with your Pro Premier clients as well. Gear icon, accountant settings is where you want to go. And then you'll go to advanced, and we call it categories because we like the term categories a lot. We use it for many things. Now, I have classes turned on. You can be warned when, transactions not assigned a class like in desktop, and you have a couple options. Some people will just use class tracking, and they'll just be doing a P&L by class because we know the balance sheet by class isn't really going to work. And you can have it assign one row per transaction or one to an entire transaction. So, the whole amount of the invoice or the bill or the check would go to the class. But keep in mind, class tracking, and particularly it's helpful if you watch that source versus target video, but class tracking in QBO, and this is, I think, the main difference with desktop and why desktop has viability for a balance sheet by class, because balance sheet activity can be at the source level, the summary level, the top of the transaction, or at the target, mostly at the source, where P&L is always at the target or the lower part of the form, right? That's the distribution account. You're hitting the income and expense. And classes is always target. There's no way to get it to be in the source area, the top area. Okay, so when you're debiting AR in an invoice or crediting AP, that's source, right? So no matter how many classes you have on it, even one to the entire transaction, it'll never pick that up on a balance sheet. But on a P&L, all day long, right? Whereas location, so I usually leave it this way where I have one to each row in a transaction. Whereas location, that's going to be at the summary level, but also at the target. It doesn't matter. It's both. And then what I like about location, and if you can do just one location per transaction, it's fantastic. So many people will use this for a different metric on a report to filter by and then use classes for something else. I like the second type of class tracking and the fact that I can name it, between 7 different options, store, territory, property, location, whatever. I'll leave it for location now. But you'll decide, and you'll know your client and what it needs and when you want to use class or both or one or the other, depending. So I've turned both on, and I'm going to leave it as what's typically the common way when you're using both class and location is one to each row in a transaction for class, and then just location. I'm going to click save. And not that I have to, I always just click done in the lower right, just in case. All right, so now I can go to the gear icon and we'll go to all lists, because that's where you'll find this kind of classes and location list. And you can just go in and add some classes. I'll leave these here. A new construction, overhead, remodel. Obviously, this file's come over from, right, Rockcastle Construction. And then location, we'll just add some. And you can do subs of each too. And you can go 4 subs deep. So you have the parent and 4 subs, just like a list element in the rest of QBO. Now, when setting up a location, there are some more options than you won't see when you're setting up classes. And obviously, you can do subclasses too or sublocations, but the location has a different title on sales form. So you could have an internal location name and an external location name. It can mean the same thing, which is kind of nice. Location has a different company name when communicating with customers. Location has a different address where customers contact me or send payments. Location has a different email address or a different phone number. So this right here should give you an idea of, well, maybe I can use location for these things. But just remember, it's always one location per transaction, one per event. I'm not going to split out a bunch of lines on a check across locations. It's going to be one. Class I can split out. So I got my Phoenix and my Tucson location here. And here's a good example on this expense transaction that I have. We'll make it like a credit card expense or something they use to pay for whatever. Doesn't really matter. But and I'm hitting it at the account detail section, but you can also do it in the items. If I'm buying some non-inventory parts for a job or something like that, I could tag an item and then choose a class or a location or something like that. You know, the appliance, and say there was 5 appliances I brought out on a job. And then I have, you know, the class. This would be for remodeling. So the total of this is $675, right? It's going to credit the credit card liability and then debit these cost of goods sold or expense accounts, right? That would be the T-chart behind the scenes. And we can look at that too, but notice the whole 675 is going to go to the Phoenix location. Whereas for the classes, I have $100 going to new construction, $200 going to overhead, and then for the, you know, 375 is going to remodel, and that's how it would show on the P&L. Now, if we go to the More tab and look at the transaction journal, which would be akin to the Control Y report, we'll see a little source target action here, but let's add the class and location columns just so you can see. So a little baby gear icon. And these detail reports, you know, are going to allow you to add more columns and stuff. And I can add class, and I'll add location. I have the expense. This is for the credit card, what's being credited, right? The Phoenix location. Notice no class shows up in the source area. First line is source. And these are the target lines. These are the distribution accounts. You'll see class showing up here. Now let's look on the sales side. And, you know, good old Christy, we will sell her that appliance or something. And then again, I have the Tucson location this time. And a class would be, you know, this would be new construction, etc. So again, class I can split out by lines, and it works really good in a profit and loss by class, or filter in other reports, as we saw with the quick report we did, or the Control Y report in the last transaction. And then the whole 538.75 is going to go to the Tucson location, where she might be buying several things. You know, blueprint charges for the work we've done, that was $2,000, and then that actually went to remodeling. Now, when you come to reports and go to business overview, scroll down, you're going to see your profit and loss and balance sheets, but you're also going to see the profit and loss by class and profit and loss by location. There's not going to even be a balance sheet by location, and certainly not a balance sheet by class. When we run the profit and loss by class, and I'm just running it for today, so I have new construction, overhead, remodel, and the total. So very similar that you would see in desktop. Likewise, here's my P&L by location, Phoenix versus Tucson. So profit and loss, you're never going to have any real issues with missing data or something unless they forgot to tag a class or location to the transaction activity. Now, when I run a balance sheet, and we'll look at it for today, and I'm going to customize it so that I can actually show, well, I can go by location. Again, class isn't really going to work out, and find that source target video, it really helps, but I can run the report for location. And these are just not specified as I'm looking for today. But I would see amounts at the balance sheet level. You know, see the 675 for the QuickBooks credit card, right? So balance sheet by location is a great workaround. But remember, you can only have one location per transaction. So as long as that's okay, then perfect.